Well, hockey will be back soon, and Canes fans have a lot to look forward to. As we gear up for a new season of Carolina Hurricanes hockey, what did we learn about the Canes' performance last season? And what are some of the storylines that might capture our attention soon? Who should we have our eyes on in the upcoming prospect showcase? And what do we know about the two players who are currently signed to PTOs with the Hurricanes? Delighted as always to have Aaron and Katie joining me to talk about all these things and more, and we'll get right to it.
Hi there.
Okay, so we look back at last year's performance, and I know, Katie, you've done a lot of work with the metrics as usual, analyzing what was working, what wasn't working. And we might be surprised by some of the things that you found there. Are the Canes set up to do better this season? And what areas of concern should we have as we look forward to the year? Katie, you want to kick it off?
Sure. Well, I found the J-Fresh card for the Canes and for their season overall, and they had a good season. There's lots to be encouraged by, and definitely there are some areas in which they have improved. How much of an improvement that is, I think, remains to be seen. There's a range of what you can expect depending on the impact that the new guys like Ehlers and Miller have on the team. As expected, it shows that the Canes were really good in generating chances. Right. I'm always harping on the fact that the Canes have really a lot of problems finishing, and this card definitely shows that while they were the first in the league for creating scoring opportunities, they were only seventh in the league in actual scoring. So there's a bit of a difference there. What really concerned me and kind of surprised me, especially because Brind'Amour's system is known for its defense as a hallmark, is while the defense itself had good metric numbers and was seventh in the league with expected goals against, they were actually 21st in the league in goals against, actual goals against. So the defense was doing its job, but there seemed to have been some breakdowns, whether it was in goal or just some bad puck luck when it came to their opponents scoring against them. So that probably would be the biggest area that the team is going to be looking to improve, is having a full healthy season of Frederik Andersen and Kochetkov working together, creating a solid foundation moving forward. The special teams were also a bit of a mixed bag. The PK was good. They were ranked second in the league in PK based on the analytics, but they were 24th for the power play. And we've talked about the power play before, and that's an area where we're hoping that Ehlers can help to dial up the team a little bit more and get that unit more productive, because the Canes already had a really good offense. If they can bring the power play into that equation as well, it's going to crank it up even further.
Yeah, and as we kind of peel the onion back on this, there's some interesting storylines that go with this. We're going to talk about three of them, which I think could really play this year for the Hurricanes. And we'll kick it off with goaltending. You mentioned goaltending, of course, being a key element as the Canes go into this season. You look at some interesting things with Freddie Andersen. His last three seasons, Freddie's played 34, 16, and 22 games in each of those seasons. I mean, this is just incredibly tough for the Hurricanes to go with him playing so little. It's challenging. And of course, we've all been waiting for Pyotr Kochetkov to kind of take the mantle. Daily Faceoff said something interesting in their predictions this year. Here's what they said about Kochetkov. And they said, we've been bullish on him taking over as Carolina's starter for years, but he has to play well for that to happen. He's coming off a down year, and the 1A job remains Andersen's when he's healthy. So I think the situation is clear when it comes to Kochetkov. So we've got a situation here where I think Kochetkov has some challenges, and Katie, can you pick it up and talk a little bit about his J-Fresh analysis for us?
Well, the main thing with Kochetkov, as far as the his player card, is it shows what a lot of us have already seen in the eye test, that when he's in the really high danger circumstances, like on the penalty kill, or he has the high danger shots against, he's one of the best goalies in the league. He is absolutely fantastic at stopping the puck. But it's when you get into those kind of middling areas that he seems to disappear or overthink things. His medium danger chance totals are surprisingly low. I mean,
Right.
we know that he's been low, but it's in the single digits, and he needs to figure something out. I mean, we've had those quotes that he said before that we've all laughed on, and that he needs to just stop thinking and
Hmm.
just start reacting and trusting his instincts. And that seems to be very much the case in this instance, because those high pressure situations where you don't have time to think because the shot's coming immediately, his instincts are fantastic. But
Yeah.
when he has a chance to second guess himself or get himself just a touch out of position, that's where things seem to fall apart. So if he can really rely on his instincts and his reflexes and his feel for the game, I think that will be the key to him having a successful season this year.
Yeah, and NHL Edge kind of echoes the same kind of metrics. He's high danger save percentage. He's in the 92 percentile, so he's right there. He's one of the best in the game. But goals against average, he's 74, so that's not a great number. And then you go to overall save percentage at 898. He's below the 50th percentile. The mid-range save percent you mentioned, he's below the 50th, and percentage games greater than 900 save percentage, he's below the 50th percentile. So his game last year just was not there, and again, it's kind of surprising because we remember he went through some stages where he was lights out. We saw that incredible stint that he had for several games where he was playing great, but then all of a sudden things don't go his way. What do we think will be the situation this year with the Canes if Freddie gets injured? How do we feel about the goaltending? What do we think might happen? Aaron, some thoughts on that?
Well, the one thing that I think that's going to be really interesting to follow through the training camp part of the season is what have they acquired in Cayden Primeau, because that is something
Right.
that a lot of people have talked about. The Canes, when we didn't have Freddie or Pyotr last year, we had Spencer Martin and Dustin Tokarski, as we've talked about before. And you just want to be in a situation where if you have to call someone up, that you're not looking at someone that, you're just hoping that they can maybe get one win out of four. You want somebody that's going to be able to make an impact and be a reliable call up or a reliable backup in the case of injury. So I'm going to be interested to see what the coaching staff's evaluation of Primeau is in that role, somebody that
Right.
could be a backup for either Freddie or Pyotr at times of need, because we know those times will arise. I think the key for the Canes this year is how long can Freddie stay healthy, and this is where the calculation just gets so difficult, because you have, at his age, you're
Yes.
talking about age-related regression creeping in and making the whole picture a lot blurrier, because what he's been dealing with has certainly not been because of that. The injuries, the knee injury, and then the blood clotting issue. Those are not age-related things. Those can happen to anybody at any age. But as he starts to get closer to that 37, 38, 39 age, you've got goalies that will be great all the way through, and then you have goalies that will fall off of a cliff very abruptly. So
Yeah.
if we can get a solid, healthy year out of Freddie Andersen, if he can play, considerably more than 16 or 22 games, then that would mean a lot for the Canes. That would be a huge difference maker for them in terms of, being able to build their season. So that's the biggest unknown to me, is what happens if, one or the other of them really can't. Now, as far as Pyotr's concerned, another benefit, I think, to having a young goaltender like Primeau in the system is that gives Pyotr someone else to compete with for some of that stuff too. Not that he's going to come in and try to steal the job necessarily, but you never know. I mean, Montreal has been pretty good with producing young goaltenders who suddenly seem to come out of nowhere. So There's never, you can't rule that out completely. So, and Primeau's stats haven't been that bad. So it's just going to be nice to have another young goaltender in the system, because at the very least, that's kind of a reminder to Kochetkov that he needs to take the lead. And if he wants this job, it's his to get. It really is.
Well, we talked about Cayden Primeau before.
Hmm.
And you're right, his underlying stats for the most part are quite good. And he had some stretches with Montreal where he looked good as well. So I think he's a guy that I feel much more comfortable with Cayden as the guy that's going to come in should we need him, as opposed to, and God love them both, Dustin and Spencer did the best they could.
They
Um,
absolutely did.
and we know that Spencer's moved off to Russia. I'm not sure where Dustin Tokarski will play this year. That'll be interesting to follow. But yeah, for sure. And again, Freddie's off to the Olympics, so this is exciting stuff. And he'll be going with Nikolai Ehlers, so that's kind of cool. But again, we'll see how it all plays out. And you look at the situations for Freddie. He had the blood clot situation 2 years ago. Last year, he had an injury that put him out. Yeah, you just don't know what's around the corner with Fred. But the crazy thing too about Freddie, as we all know, is when he's healthy, he is
Oh,
outstanding. He's a great goaltender.
absolutely.
So let's hope that he has one of those years where health is on his side, and we'll see how that plays out. So yeah, clearly goaltending. Pyotr's going to be called upon this year. Freddie, if he's healthy, will be super. And we've got Primeau and Amir Miptakov, and we shouldn't forget him, I guess, as well.
That's right.
He's in the mix, and of course, I understand he's going to be staying with his buddy Andrei Svechnikov. So.
Aw.
So that's kind of fun as they head into training camp. So we'll see how that plays out. And speaking about Russians, the next storyline that we wanted to get into was around Alex Nikishin. And boy, there's a lot of discussion around Nikishin these days. As we go into this, I thought I'd read something from Stephen Ellis at Hockey Faceoff talking about the Hurricanes prospects for this year. And he mentioned this about Nikishin. He said, finally, it's time for Nikishin to shine. Nikishin is one of the top prospects in hockey and should have a pretty immediate effect with the Hurricanes out of training camp. Nikishin has added more urgency in his puck game, especially last season. He's big, smart, great with the puck, and all those traits should allow him to challenge for first pairing minutes sooner rather than later. His advanced pro experience doesn't make him your average prospect, that's for sure. And I know that our thinking going into this was, okay, is he going to slot in a situation where he can actually play some big minutes? Might he be in the mix for the Calder? Katie, you want to kick it off?
Well, I definitely think he's going to be playing some big minutes, whether that is on the first pair or the second pair. If he starts the season on the third pair, I think that's just for getting his feet wet, and that's not going to last long, that he'll be on his way up shortly. The question then for the Calder becomes, how does he distinguish himself in such a way that as a defenseman, he is in the same conversation as some of the other promising young forwards like Demidov in Montreal? Right. And the only way he can do that is to get some national attention, some national spotlight. And the one defenseman that the national media has learned how to love is Jaccob Slavin. And so to get the kind of attention that he needs, he's going to have to produce results, but he's also going to have to play a lot of minutes alongside of Slavin and look for his opportunities there, which there should be plenty of, because he does have a good head for offense, and that is not Jaccob Slavin's bread and butter for sure. So it would open up a lot of opportunities for Nikishin to work his magic in the zone with his big shot and right. Finding the soft spots from the blue line, knowing that he has somebody like Slavin behind him to help mitigate any hiccups that come along the way. But then beyond that, I don't know that it's just the top pairing minutes. He'd also need to assert himself in such a way that he is entrusted with quarterbacking the top power play, right. Because that's also going to be an opportunity for him to shine, for him to get some points and to show off all of those skills that we have been so patiently waiting for, perhaps not so patiently waiting for, that we've seen in all of his highlights in the KHL. So possibility, yes, but a lot of things have to fall into line for him in order to be in the Calder conversation and with the chance of seriously taking it.
Well, one thing about you're talking about his shot, and I pulled up some NHL Edge stuff on that from his short tenure in the playoffs. His average speed was 78 miles an hour, which was the 99th percentile of the group that was there. His top speed was 93.67, which was in the 79th percentile, and 90 to 100 mile an hour shots. In the short term he was there, he had three of them. So he was in the 93rd percentile. Well, he was in
Wow.
that. So he's a guy that, he's going to want to shoot the puck, and a different type of quarterback, as we've discussed in the past. And of course, Shane Gostisbehere, as Shane is more of he likes to move the puck. He likes to find the open man, and he's not so much a big shooter. So I think with Nate just gone from last year, and he was our big shooter for the most part, it would be nice to have a guy like Nikishin to jump in and do that. I wanted to mention one other thing here about Nikishin from McKean's. They had their this is the 25-26 annual preview, and they said a couple of things I think that are really relevant when we look at Alex. They say he excels defensively. This is interesting. So not many folks have talked about Alex and his defensive game. But the folks at McKean say he excels defensively, using his awareness, timing, and angling to shut down plays effectively. So that sounds like the right kind of player. He sticks to opponents well, sealing them against the boards with precise checks and using his active stick to disrupt plays. And offensively, he's efficient rather than flashy, moving smoothly with the puck and delivering accurate, well-timed passes. So again, here's a guy that he's not a flashy player. If you watch Nikishin, he's not like your guy over in Montreal and some of the other young defensemen that we are talking about frequently. He's more of a kind of just goes about his business, but does it exceedingly well. The final comment from McKean's, I think, is critical. It says Nikishin is NHL ready and showed great flashes with Carolina in the playoffs last season. He projects as a top pairing defenseman with unmatched two-way impact. These are high words of praise coming from folks who spend all their time analyzing these players and talking about them. So I think again, we've got a guy that in Nikishin that is going to be critical. Now, something that was interesting, and we talked a little bit about this too, Aaron, and I'd like you to maybe share a couple of thoughts on this. There were some comments recently about an interview with Alex, and did you have any thoughts about what was said? Do you recall what they talked about?
You're talking about the interview with
Yes.
I can't remember how to say her name. I'm sorry.
Daria Tuboltseva. Yes.
Tuboltseva. Thank you. I'm so sorry. Yes, I did see that interview on X. I think, Katie, you probably saw some of that too. It was about a couple of weeks ago that some of that was shared. And what impressed me from my recollection of reading it was just that he talked about the work. He really focused on the work he needs to do and
Yes.
the work he's expecting to do. And he, gave the vibe to me of a player who is just really eager to get there and start putting that work in, with very solid work ethic. And I mean, these are Carolina Hurricanes terms. We talk about the Canes all the time with these words. So this is not someone who's coming in expecting to be some hotshot. He's not coming in expecting to be treated like, an automatic star or anything of the sort. He's expecting, even though he was the captain of his team back in Russia, he's expecting to be treated like anybody else who has to prove himself and earn his way. And I think when you hear that from someone who's, so obviously talented, you just kind of get that sense of, this is going to be great, because that is exactly the kind of attitude that Brad Brind'Amour is going to love, that Tim Gleason is going to love. And this is going to give them the trust in him that he's not expecting to come in and be handed those top pair minutes or handed those power play minutes. He's expecting to have to be patient and work. And that's something I think that, just looking at it from that perspective, looking at that article, I would say it's a key for the Canes fans too, is that we shouldn't be having, the Twitter equivalent of pitchforks and torches if he does start out on the third pair. We should not be storming the arena if
Yes,
he has to play, lower than we think he should. He may be on the second pairing for a while with Chatfield. We've talked about that as a
sure,
possibility. We don't
sure.
know what the plan exactly is for Keandre Miller, and that's going to be something that's going to impact all of this too. It's another piece of the puzzle because they're both new to the Canes, really, even though Nikishin was there for the playoffs. They're both going to be new to the Canes in terms of, getting started for their first full regular season. So we just need to be patient and trust that this young man who talked about himself that way knows perfectly well that there's no instant gratification in the NHL and that he's not going to be disheartened or discouraged if he has to work his way up and
Yeah.
prove himself a little bit. So I think it's going to be neat because I think he's going to have an entire arena full of fans that are just cheering him on, especially in those moments when he unveils that boom, both in the shot and in the hits. He's going to be a tremendously fun player to watch, and I was excited. Did you have anything from the interview that you wanted to highlight,
Oh,
Tom?
yeah, I definitely do. A couple of things that really jumped out at me was he did talk about playing in Lenovo Center, and he said it was incredible.
Yes.
Like you said, it was just like just such a thrill for him. And he said I had heard a little bit about North American rinks, but this was this is really something. Yeah, so I thought that was kind of cool. The other thing he talked a little bit about his friend Demidov, and he was saying that of course Demidov came over and he had a pretty good understanding of the English language. He had done some very serious work studying prior to coming over. And of course, Alex said that was a bit of a gotcha for me because I was a little bit behind the curve on that one. I probably should have been putting more emphasis on my English, but he did do a lot of work this summer apparently, and
Oh,
uh,
good.
and he said he can basically he can talk to his teammates now. He's got a command of the language that's sufficient to help him in terms of communication with them. And it's kind of like you remember when Pyotr first started kind of working his kind of magic with English, and he picked it up as well. So this is great, and I think the whole tenor of the interview was clear. He just wants to be a member of the team, and as it was said very clearly, he doesn't want to be a weak link. So
Hmm.
he wants to be someone that makes a difference out there. And I love the attitude of Alex. I just everything I see about him, he just really is embodying Carolina Hurricanes front and center. And boy, oh boy, that's with his talent, this is going to be a lot of fun. So yeah, so there's a storyline we're definitely going to be following. Gosh, we followed it all last season as he found his way and ultimately came over, surprising a lot of folks with that. But I think the surprises are going to continue this year as Alex really starts to write his story for the Hurricanes. So it's great stuff. Now, one other storyline we wanted to spend a few minutes with, and with this gentleman, we've kind of talked a little bit about him in our last podcast and said, kind of cool. He just signed an 8-year deal, so he's got 9 years left with the Hurricanes. So I guess we're going to be talking about him for a little while longer. And of course, that's Jackson Blake. And the big question around Jackson Blake is, I get there's two questions. Where's he going to slot in the lineup? Number one, and I guess number two, what should we expect from him this year? A lot of discussion this summer about him. I saw a recent interview with Adam Gold talking to Rod Brind'Amour, and they were saying some very positive things about Blake. So, what do we think the situation might be for Jackson Blake this year? Katie?
Oh, that's a good question. Is he going to build off of what he started last season? Is he going to have a little bit of a sophomore slump? Don't know. We'll see how it goes, but we know that his work ethic is there, and that's what's key with the Canes. He was always going after the puck. If he lost the puck, he'd often get it back and just never give up. He was insistent on not taking his foot off of the gas. It was all gas all the time, and If you look at his player card defensively is excellent. For having been a rookie, he got a 98% defensive rating for a player. I mean, that is incredible. And that's not going to slip. That's not going to go anywhere. He's just going to get stronger, and he's going to refine those tools in the Hurricane system. So where I'd like to see him build this year is on his offensive skill, because he did seem a little bit snake bit. It seemed like he'd get opportunities and it'd just slip off of his stick, or he'd hit the post, or he'd pass instead of shoot. There are a few learning curves that he went through as far as knowing which opportunities to take in certain circumstances, and getting those instincts. So I think that's really where he's going to be able to round his game into form. And because of that, and because of the trust that the team has put in him with that new contract, I believe he is going to be on one of the top two lines. I'd love to see him on the top line. He got a lot of time with Sebastian Aho last season, and they did have some pretty good chemistry. And Ehlers coming in could end up building on that. And Blake has a particular talent of retrieving pucks, which would give Aho and Ehlers a lot more opportunities to keep creating and to find scoring chances. If Rod decides to put Jarvis up on that top line, which I don't think any of us would argue that Jarvis has earned that slot on the top line, then I definitely think that Blake could slot in next to Kotkaniemi on that second scoring line, and really be a positive influence there with KK and Svetch. So wherever he ends up, he is going to be a net positive for that line and help solidify that line defensively. So just hoping few more bounces go his way, and he should have a great sophomore year.
Aaron, thoughts?
Well, I agree for the most part. I do think, I want to revisit the little sophomore slump thing, because it's not just, it's not a myth. It's not, it's something that really does happen. And the main reason that it happens is because you spend your first year in the NHL and you're kind of an unknown quantity as you go from team to team. The goaltenders don't know you. They don't know what you're going to try to pull. The opponents don't know you. Some veterans are very, it depends on the team, but there are some teams where the veterans kind of give a little, hands off the rookie vibe kind of a feeling, so that you're not trying to injure a rookie with a really hard hit or anything like that. So things get a little bit more ramped up, I think, in the second year. And there have been a lot of players who've had an excellent first year and then a second year that just seemed like a reset or retool. And we could even talk back about Seth Jarvis, because Seth Jarvis had a little bit of that himself. Now, he didn't suffer in the points perspective as much, but he didn't seem to be taking that next step. And the fans talked about that a lot, but the coaching staff did not see that. What they saw was Jarvis was at that point stepping back a little bit to solidify those areas of his game that, maybe were a little bit weak areas that we don't necessarily focus on because he was playing so well in general. But like, Katie was talking about Blake's defensive rating, Jarvis was also very good in his first season, and now he's extremely good. He's at 100%, I think, on JFresh. So that's what you shared with me the other day. But there was a time period in between there where there was a little bit of movement, and that's where I think that you have to expect that a young player, especially if he gets consistent top six deployment, because that is one thing with Jackson Blake last season. He did spend a good bit of time on the top line with Aho and whoever else was up there, because it was different people. But he did not stay there very long, and he was not there, and in this one solid stretch all the way through. He was moving up and down. He was on the second line at times. He was on the fourth line at times. He was actually on the fourth line probably more than people realize at this point, because he began there and he was there for a good long stretch of games. So that's where, if he's got consistent top six deployment, no one should panic if he seems to be taking a little step back, because, and it may not be offensively, he may be getting, some good scoring opportunities. He may actually, I would expect him to outproduce his scoring from last season, because I think he only, would he end up with 34 points? So I would expect him to end up with more than that. But, there may be some defensive hiccups in some other areas along the way where he has to smooth some things out. And again, it's that message of patience that fans shouldn't be getting too bent out of shape if Jackson Blake doesn't quite look like he did in the first year. And unfortunately, we all call them, they're out there on the internet. We call them the Complaining-X. There will be people who will look at any missteps from Jackson Blake, and the first thing they will
Sure.
say is, why did they sign him to that contract, But we should be prepared to be extremely happy if he outperforms our expectations, but also perfectly satisfied if there's a little bit of that sophomore slump in his game, because it's natural, and they signed him to the contract knowing that happens a lot. So
Yeah, all good points. And, interesting thing on NHL Edge, some of the analysis tells us some things about Jackson Blake, too. He was at the 99th percentile for offensive zone time. So he was most of the time, that probably his defensive numbers are great because he was in the ozone so much.
he was in the ozone.
He was definitely, and we know that because he was capable of handling the puck, staying on the play, making things happen. So he was eating up minutes in that offensive zone. But a couple of areas he struggled on, and I think these are the concern as you go into year two. Top skating speed. He's not a quick skater. So he was below the 50th percentile in skating side. And the other thing was top shot speed. And again, he's below the 50th. So we know he's not a big shooter. He's not a hard shooter. He gets his goals by, kind of being in the mix and finding ways to get them past. Some of them past the goalie that probably shouldn't have gone by, but he got some good breaks that way. I remember a few. But again, I think the good news for the Hurricanes, they've got depth. And as we've talked about the roster, right now we're looking at a couple of guys sitting on that fourth line, and Taylor Hall and Eric Robinson, who could slot up there if they need to. If Jackson Blake is struggling a little bit, they can take some pressure off him and move him back to the fourth line if they need to. So I think it's a good situation. But anyway, you look at it with Blake, he's a guy that definitely is going to be a key member of the team. Interesting comment from Daily Faceoff in their 25-26 prediction looking at Blake. And they said the 17-17-34 line masks the fact he ended the year as a first liner and power play one member, scoring 6 goals in his final 9 games. So there's a story that maybe we sometimes forget. I don't recall him doing that, but I guess he did, and that's fantastic. He could be one of the cheapest 25-goal scorers available, although Ehlers' signing dampens my enthusiasm a bit. So that's coming from the guys over at Daily Faceoff. Blake, clearly a guy that he's going to be working hard this summer. The kind of player he is. It comes from his dad. It comes honestly. So, no matter what happens on the ice, he's going to make things happen in a good way. So I'm looking forward to Blake's second year. And hopefully that sophomore jinx is something that he can avoid coming into this year. So a number of storylines that have been in discussion on X and other places. We have chosen not to get into them in big detail today. Of course, there's always the discussion about the 2C spot and the power play and other areas on the Canes. So we'll leave those for another time, but I think right now concentration will remain on the discussions we've had today, and certainly look forward to the play of folks like Alexander Nikishin and Jackson Blake in the coming days. So let's move on to the next part of discussion, and I thought we'd spend a few minutes and talk about the prospect showcase coming up. And I thought for you, Aaron and Katie, I'd give you a chance to talk about some of the folks that we do know a little bit about. Obviously, there's some players that are up from the Chicago side, and in fact, we saw a couple of them with the Hurricanes this past year for a cup of coffee, and that would be Bradley Nadeau and Justin Robidaw. And of course, the other member of that group that we're very interested in is Charles-Alexis Legault. Anybody want to kick this off?
I'll go ahead because my quick comment is I've said this multiple times because of his size and his profile. I'm really interested to see how Legault does with this face-off and to see how well he performs, because I think he's not far from being NHL ready. And his size, his reach, and the fact that he's a stay-at-home defenseman really profiles as something that the Canes could use in the near future. And I'm really looking forward to seeing how that translates, because as we all know, the AHL game is not played at the pace of an NHL game, and
Sure.
how he's able to adjust there. But yeah, I think he's the one. I know what Nadeau is, and some of the other ones I think have a lot of skill, but their likelihood of being impact NHLers, especially for the Canes, is limited. But the one that I think has the biggest opportunity in the near future to become a regular is Legault, and I'm really looking forward to seeing him.
Absolutely. Aaron, any thoughts?
Well, I would agree with Katie on that, and just add that I think we have talked a lot about Nadeau. I think there are some people who are going to be disappointed if Bradley Nadeau does not make the team. But
Yeah.
realistically, this is not a player you want in your bottom six. And right now, the top six wing slots are full. So you want to make sure that he comes into the Canes. If that happens, when that happens, at a time when he can make a difference on one of the top two lines. So, and that, those opportunities may well come up. But he does still have some work to do in the game away from the puck, from what I have been told. So another year in the AHL is not going to hurt him at all. It's going to be tremendously fun to watch him in the prospect showcase, though, because playing against people that are mostly in his own age range, and that he was dominating quite well over in the AHL last year, is this going to be fun. So, and then Robida, I thought did well in his brief call up too, but again, not somebody that's going to be an immediate ad for the Canes. So, just wishing all of those guys the best at the showcase, and hope they have a great time.
Yeah, there's a number of players that I thought I'd spend a minute on, because Ivan Ryabkin is an interesting one. He signed his ELC like a week ago. It's kind of a bit of a surprise. Not many folks were expecting that, I don't think. He tore up the USHL. We talked about it last year when he came over to play with Muskegon. 19 goals in 27 games. Interesting comments from the folks at McKean's on this, and they said 1 year ago, Ivan Ryabkin was being compared to other high-flying Russian offensive dynamos, Matvei Mishkov and Ivan Demidov. So, Aaron, that's right up your alley with Demidov, of course.
Mm-hmm.
He put up 58 points as a 16-year-old in the MHL. So this is a guy that tore it up. The MHL is like junior hockey, it'd be like the USHL and so on. And he really tore it up. But again, there were some concerns with his attitude in certain ways, his work ethic, his conditioning, all the things that these younger players sometimes, when they've got so much talent, they just go out there and and they just do it naturally, right? And I think Ryabkin is a guy that clearly needs to be closer to the Hurricanes. And we talked a little bit about this offline to say maybe the reason they wanted to sign him was to have him, right here with much more control by the Hurricanes folks. And the question is, where is he going to end up this year? Is he going to head to Muskegon? Is he heading up to Canada to play junior? Is he going to go down to Chicago? And I know that one of our compatriots, Nick Bass, feels he might be heading to Chicago. And I think that would be great if he does, because again, working with Cam Abbott and the crew down there would be wonderful. One interesting final comment from the guys at McKean's. They said he's undoubtedly one of the most divisive prospects in all of hockey today. So he's another guy that he's got the good and some other things I guess we have to think about. But there is still a legitimate path for him to make the NHL. I think the fact that Canes jumped on this, they believe he can. We talked about the draft earlier, going into the draft. Of course, I was a guy that was really high on Ryabkin, so it seems to be playing out quite nicely. So he's there. You've got a couple of other guys from Chicago that'll be there. Yoel Nystrom, 23-year-old. He's a veteran D guy. He played a couple of games, I think, with Chicago last year. He's played parts of 5 seasons with Farjestads in the SHL. So he's a veteran. I mean, he's going to come in and add some veteran leadership. I don't see him very high in the depth chart. and he's a smaller player at 5'11", 170. So I don't know what to expect from him. Dominic Badinka is going to be there, 19-year-old. He's coming over early, 1 year in the playing with Malmo last year. He's a right-hand shot guy. They like him. Got some work to do. So we'll see how it goes for Badinka. You look at that Chicago team. It's interesting as we talk about this, and their defensive core is going to be loaded this year.
Yes.
You've got these young guys. You've got Charles-Alexis Legault. You've got, of course, my man Dominic Fensori, and you've got some other guys that have been re-upped and back with the team again this year too, like Ronan Seeley. So, going to be fun talking about the Chicago Wolves this year. Somebody else that we need to talk about is going to be Gleb Trikazov. So, I don't know if you recall last year in the Prospect Showcase, Gleb was tremendous.
He was great.
Yeah, he had 4 goals. He had a hat trick in one game. He really, and he had just come over as kind of a 19-year-old, and here he is, over in North America after being signed, and he came over with Ruslan Kazib. And boy, I tell you, it was really something to see him. Now, he had a tough year, right? So just 3 points in 20 games with the Wolves. He was hurt. A number of different things just didn't go right for him this year. And I'm kind of hopeful that he'll get back on track because, the Canes think very highly of Gleb. And he's another guy that brings natural offensive ability to the table. He was drafted much lower than was expected. So the Canes did get him in a situation where he was, again, looked upon as maybe a first round or certainly high second round guy. So we'll watch Gleb. Somebody else? How about Felix Angersoren? What are we thinking about Felix these days? Thoughts?
Well, he was so impressive. It was in the 2023 preseason. He had a great debut. Yeah. And there were people that were talking about whether he might make the team. Even the head coach seemed to think that, he was making a case for himself at that time. Yeah. But as it turned out, sending him to Chicago was the right move because, or sending him back home and then to Chicago was the right move because he did have some development to do. And so he was in Chicago last year, this past season, and just did not stand out. He only had 20 points in 61 games and was a -10, so that's not really what you want to see from Felix. I know he's been trying to add on a little bit in terms of body weight and all that sort of thing. And that's a hard thing for, it takes time. You can't just wake up and snap your fingers and add 20 pounds. It doesn't happen, unless you're me and there's chocolate chip cookies involved, but no. But yeah, for these athletes, it's not that easy to, you get older and you think, gosh, I remember those days. But no, I think that he's got, what I like about Felix, and I haven't had a chance to watch him much with Chicago, but what I like about him is that he's got a really high hockey IQ.
He does.
And those players usually do find a way. So he had a bad year. He had some setbacks. I think that he's going to come back full of enthusiasm and be trying to pick up from, a better place and get going on a better foot this year. So we'll see if we see some of that in the showcase.
Yeah, and I think you're right. I mean, high hockey IQ. The guy is, when you watch him in international play, he shines. He's just a great player from that perspective. But he does need to bulk up. The other thing that was unfortunate last year was he was tried at center ice a lot in Chicago. They put him. It was a bit of an experiment to see could they move because he sees the ice so well and he's responsible defensively. They thought, is this a guy that we can move to the center ice spot, knowing the Canes could sure use some more talent at center down the line. But that didn't work out so well. So I fully expect he's going to be back on the right side, and I think that'll be good for him. And I look forward to seeing him in the showcase because, this is a chance for him. He's been there a couple of times. This is a chance for him to really show that he's taking this seriously in terms of getting himself into a place where he can be a serious prospect for the Canes again. Right now, he's not there. He's well down the line. And I know there's a lot of Caniacs that will probably be surprised with that. But he was a guy that many people thought would be a Cane not too long down the road. One other guy I want to mention in Chicago before we spend just 30 seconds on some of the folks we don't know is Ruslan Kazeev. Ruslan Kazeev, we've talked a lot about. He's a guy that 6'6", 200 and some odd pounds. He's just a huge mountain of a man in the goal. And there's nothing wrong with having some big goaltenders, as we know. He's got that Russian pedigree. Again, he was trained extremely well. He's a guy that he's just athletic as heck, and he shows that. Some of the saves he makes are circus saves, and it's incredible. Uh, Last year was a so-so year for him. He played a little bit more than was expected, right? He played 20 games
Mm-hmm.
last year, which, when you looked at him as number 3 on the depth chart, and he could have actually been pushed down to Bloomington for more play. But they chose not to do that. They wanted to keep him close, and so he's definitely a prospect, and I expect a lot more from him this year too. So let's keep an eye on Ruslan Kazeev at the prospect showcase. He is really the goalie of note. Nikita Kapp is there, but I don't know where he sits in the depth chart at this point in time. So we'll keep an eye on Kazeev. There were 3 other guys that were invited that we don't know anything about. This is interesting. They aren't part of the Canes world. They weren't drafted by the Canes, but I thought I'd mention them. One of them is Ethan Lee. He's a center, 24-year-old guy. He played with Quinnipiac for 3 seasons. This is interesting. So here's a guy that they might have scouted him, whether, maybe Brind'Amour saw him while he was watching Skyler down there. He actually moved from Quinnipiac over to Bentley University, became their captain and had a big season last year. So he's a guy that's, again, 24 years old. He's a little older. He's a solid player at 6'1", 95, centerman. Who knows? All these guys, they get invites. They don't usually stick around. So I'm not so sure what the future holds for Ethan. Blake Biondi is another centerman, 23-year-old guy. He was drafted in the 4th round by Montreal in 2020.
Mm-hmm.
So there you go. The Habs looked at him. He has an interesting award. He was the Minnesota Mr. Hockey Award, in 2020. And that is for the outstanding senior high school boys hockey player in the state of Minnesota. This is something, right? So now there have been a few players that have actually come out of that. Nick Perbix actually was one of the guys that was in the voting for that one year. He didn't win it, but he was in the voting. So there are some players that, might show up. But this, I thought, was an interesting one with Biondi. So he's signed, I think, with Chicago this year. So he'll probably show up with the Wolves, and we'll get a chance to see what he can do. And rounding it out is a gentleman called Evan Vierling, and he was drafted in the 5th round by the Rangers in 2020 as well. He's another 6-footer, not particularly heavy. He's about 180. But he's a guy that played with the Barrie Colts. And that's where, of course, Andrei Svechnikov played as well in the Ontario Junior League. And he had a big season with the Colts. Vierling did in 22-23 with 95 points in 60 games. So he's a guy that, again, some of these players, they just kind of float around and who knows where they end up. But all 3 of these guys are a little bit older at 23, 24, and I don't see them as future Hurricanes, but they're interesting guys to take a look at in any case. So we'll watch them as well. Now, so let's move on to the final part of this piece of the discussion, and that's a look at these PTO signings for the Hurricanes. So I don't know if you're last year, the Canes had a bunch of PTOs. They go back and forth, right? One year they'll have 1 or 2, and then they'll have a bunch. And a lot of it, as you know, has to do with, their schedule. So if they have a schedule where they have back-to-back games, it kind of puts them in a situation where they're trying to find some extra bodies to fill the roster. And I think that's part of the decision that they have here. But it turns out that both players, Oliver Kylington and Giovanni Smith, were with the Colorado Avalanche last year, Katie. So what can you tell us about either one of these players?
Well, Smith is definitely a 4th liner at best. He plays a heavy game, and as long as he doesn't get burned, I guess he's fine. He didn't really impress me. His stint with the Avs was short. He came over
Yes.
from San Jose in the Blackwood Georgiev
Correct.
trade, and I guess he was just kind of the extra contract to help the Avs even things out. He was a body to fill some space because the Avs went through a ton of players due to injury and other issues. They had 49 different players dressed for them last year, and Smith was one of them. And of those 49, he was probably the least impressive of all of them, save perhaps one of the
Wow.
goalies who never saw the ice. So I think I'm just going to leave it at that as far as Smith is concerned. Maybe he'd be good for an extra body on the Wolves or something like that if he doesn't find an NHL home this season, and be available just in case. Kylington is a little bit more of an interesting situation because he does have NHL talent, or at least he did back before injuries and other issues interfered with that. He was hoping for a rebirth of sorts with the Avs last season, and it just never quite materialized. Once again, he spent some time injured, and it was really unfortunate because it looked like he was finally figuring it out, finally getting into a groove, and he got injured and it sidelined him again, and he just wasn't able to come back after that. And by that point, the Avs were in the latter part of the season, and they didn't have time to wait for him to get it figured out. They were pushing for a playoff berth and, making sure that they got the 3 seed wrapped up, and they, had their moves, and Kylington just wasn't part of their plan moving forward. And so with the PTO, there's a little more upside with him, but again, there's just the injury issues and not knowing whether or not he can recapture the skill that he showed before all of that happened are the big question marks. So we'll see. Based on what I saw last season, I'm not particularly hopeful, but I'd love it if he would prove me wrong.
Yeah, I mean, Kylington, and you're right, Katie, he had a breakout season, 21-22 with the Flames. 9 goals, 22 assists, and a plus 34, and he was playing about 18 minutes a game. So he's a guy that they were really talking big about him after that season. In fact, the scouting report from Hockey Forecaster said this: the Swedish defenseman is blossoming as he reaches his prime. He's a terrific skater who can carry the puck out of trouble and make a good first pass. He's getting better at picking his spots for joining the rush, but his lack of size can be a problem. So he's a guy that they saw as a very strong offensive defenseman. Obviously, 31 points is a good start on it, and he was really starting to trend upward in a big way. In fact, signed a 2-year deal with the Flames as a result of that. And everything, the wheels came off. As we know, he missed an entire season, which is really unusual. It's kind of rare that you see that with a player, but for personal reasons, he just stepped away from hockey. And coming back has been extremely difficult. And you're right, Katie. He thought, this deal with Colorado, and it was a low-cost deal for the Avalanche, about $1 million. Hey, this would be a win-win, right? We talked about it a little bit at that time and saying, okay, you got Calvin DeHaan and you got, you got Oliver Kylington, you got some others, a cast of others trying to get on that blue line. And he just never really panned out. I think the situation here is that, left shot guy, veteran, could he take a 2-way deal and go down to Chicago? He'd be a nice guy to have down there to continue to work with the younger players as well as be available for a recall. The Canes don't have a lot of players in Chicago that they can recall at this point, I don't think. They haven't added a lot of veterans. Ty Smith was there last year. He's not there. So clearly, he could be a guy that could fill that role. But in any case, we'll be watching him. I was in Calgary recently, spending some time with my sons, and one of my sons is a big hockey player, and actually saw him in a game, the final game of the series that he was in the Summer League, and he had a chance to fire some of his bullets. He looked a little bit like Alexander Nikishin back there. In any case, he was talking to me about Oliver Kylington. when he was with the Flames, and he did mention that he thought Kylington had played well his last season with the Flames, and he had some positive things to say about him for sure. I think as we wrap things up, I thought we'd spend a couple of minutes and just talk about how dull has it been? We've had very little to talk about, and it's probably one of the worst summers for hockey activity that I can remember. Katie?
Yeah, just been trying to trudge along. Thankfully, school started back for me, so it's hoping things go a little faster. Not as much time to dwell on all of the lack of movement that has happened in the NHL. The Canes, new road jersey reveal that came through yesterday was like the biggest thing, and
a breath of fresh air
because there's been no news that. All this dialogue is happening because we're just sitting here treading water, twiddling our thumbs, whichever idiomatic expression you want to use, just waiting for hockey to finally start again.
Yes.
Eric?
I was thinking to myself the other day that depending on how old you are, the phrase "cruel summer" either means Bananarama or Taylor Swift. But either way,
there we go.
Either way, this has been in a lot of ways. And I know, Tom, you talked about this a little bit. It has been a cruel summer for some NHLers and for a lot of AHLers who have had to, deal with this lack of movement, this lack of opportunity by signing overseas. And some of them are quite young. Some of them, we're used to players maybe signing overseas in the twilight of their careers and wanting to get those couple extra years of play before they really can't anymore. But when you see some of these younger players that are accepting deals, in the KHL and other places, you realize that this decision, kind of perplexing decision by a handful of middle road teams to say, no, we think we're right on the cusp. We're going to stand our ground. We're going to hold the line, and not create some of that movement and add some guys and subtract some guys. There's a lot of players that have been left out. So I think it's been a dull summer for us, very boring, but it's actually been kind of a not so fun summer for these guys to have to pack up their lives and go overseas. So hopefully whatever this is just a strange anomaly before the new collective bargaining agreement stuff starts kicking in. And one of the things that we're all looking forward to, I think, in some ways, is that next season, the hockey season is supposed to start at the end of September.
Right.
So that should be an interesting change. An interesting 2 more games in the season, two fewer preseason games, which is going to make Rod Brind'Amour do his best Gene Kelly impression. Somebody hand him an umbrella. But we don't want the summers to be longer. That's for sure.
Well, a couple of comments. The top signings were kind of underwhelming. I mean, the Canes were right in there with Nikolai Ehlers, and of course, Mitch Marner was the big one. But after that, it wasn't. I mean, Orlov was one of the top ones, and I don't know what to say about that. Interesting thing about, you mentioned AHLers and others going to the KHL. Boy, there were a bunch of ex kind of Canes folks that went. Rocco Grimaldi, Andrew Prudorowski, Max Lajoie, Chase Prisky, Ty Smith. He's gone to Russia. Joey Keane, and an interesting one was Vasily Ponomarov. Now that was kind of interesting. He signed a 3-year deal in the KHL. I guess he gave up on the Pens. They just weren't giving him an opportunity to get it done. But these players have to play, and you kind of wonder, some of them going over to play in Russia. That's kind of an interesting concept when you think about it. In any case, we'll be following the storylines. We'll be following what happens in the prospect showcase coming up, and of course the exhibition games, and then of course getting ready for the season start. For those of you who've been watching or listening, as always, we're thrilled that you spent time with us. If you have any comments or thoughts, please put those in the comment section down below, and we'll try to respond as quickly as we can. If you like this episode, please press the like button. That'd be great. And of course, If you want to be alerted of future episodes of Storm Tracker, please press the subscribe button and, of course, the bell, and you'll be alerted. And we'll look forward to getting together with you real soon right here.